He left a woman who wasn't old. He woke up a sleeping lioness. She was 63. She had $12 in her purse. Her husband had left her in a foreign state. No home, no money, no way back. He thought she'd go broke, but she opened a bakery, became a hero in the community, climbed higher than he'd ever climbed before. You think this is just a story of betrayal? It's a story about revenge, rebirth, and the power that is born in silence. Watch to the end to find out how one woman turned destruction into rebirth. Remember, sometimes a lioness just sleeps. Subscribe, comment where you're watching from. I don't remember what the weather was like that morning. Isn't that funny? 63 years on this earth, and I remember the smell of cinnamon in my grandmother's kitchen when I was 7. But I can't tell you whether it was raining or sunny the day my husband left me. What I do remember is the click. That soft, final sound the door made when it closed behind him. Not a slam, not a bang, just a quiet little click, like the closing of a chapter in a book he no longer felt like reading. That was Junior, never loud in his leaving, always quiet enough to make you wonder if he was ever really there. We'd been married 27 years. I knew that man better than anyone, or at least I thought I did. He loved sweet tea with too much sugar, scratched behind his ear when he lied, and claimed he could fix any appliance. Though in truth, we'd gone through 3 microwaves in 2 years. He also loved routine. Church on Sundays, mechanic shop Monday through Friday, spades at the Hendersons every second Saturday. But somewhere around year 25, things started shifting. Not all at once, just a little tilt at first. He started staying late at the shop. Didn't want supper when he came home. Kept his phone screen turned away from me at night. And he stopped calling me baby. I didn't ask questions, not at first. When you've lived through as much as I have, losing my daughter to breast cancer, raising grandbabies in my 60s, watching your own body start to betray you, you learn to choose your battles. So I let him drift. And he did. Like a boat slipping off the dock while you're still tying the rope. Then came the suggestion, why don't you go visit your cousin Charissa in Oklahoma? You've been wanting to see her for years, right? His voice was syrupy sweet, too sweet. You need a change of scenery. I'll cover the bus ticket. He offered to pack my bag for me, and I should have known right then. Junior hadn't packed his own socks in 30 years. But I was tired, and the idea of seeing Charissa, of being somewhere quiet, away from his new silences, sounded like a blessing. So I went. Got on a Greyhound with a floral suitcase, my pill organizer, and a paperback mystery novel I never finished. I kissed him on the cheek before I left. He didn't kiss back. Charissa picked me up from the Tulsa station in a borrowed car. Her house was smaller than I remembered and smelled like formula and fried onions. Her toddler was sick, her husband was tense, and she was exhausted. I didn't know you were coming, she admitted, shifting her baby to one hip. Uncle Junior said it was last minute. I laughed and told her it was fine. I could sleep on the couch. I didn't mind, but something in her eyes made my stomach twist. The first night passed quietly. The second, too. On the third morning, I woke up and reached for my phone. No missed calls. I dialed Junior just to check in, maybe hear his voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I blinked. Tried again. Same message. I texted him. Nothing. I tried to log into our bank account to make sure everything was all right. Declined. I tried another card. Declined again. My hands trembled as I opened my banking app. The account we'd shared for decades? Closed. Every cent gone. My breath got stuck somewhere between my ribs. I sat there. The baby crying in the background. My phone buzzing with error messages. And I realized I didn't know what state my husband was in, literally or figuratively. I called our neighbor, Miss Evelyn, in Atlanta. She picked up on the first ring. Evelyn, hey, it's Ruby. Have you seen Junior? There was a pause. Ruby. Honey, I thought y'all moved out. I saw some people moving furniture yesterday. Thought you was heading to Florida like y'all talked about. I felt the blood drain from my face. My fingers went cold. What do you mean, moved out? I mean, there's a sold sign on your front lawn, baby. I hung up. Not out of rudeness, but because my whole world had shifted so suddenly, I wasn't sure I could hold the phone. I just sat there on the couch, surrounded by Cheerio dust and baby toys, and let the reality pour in. He left me. Took everything. My house, my money, my future. Charissa noticed my silence. Auntie, you okay? I nodded. Just tired. But I wasn't just tired. I was hollowed out. Later that afternoon, a knock came at the door. A courier with an envelope. Legal documents, property transfers, power of attorney. All signed, all notarized. But not by me. I scanned them and saw my name scribbled on the bottom in a handwriting that looked almost like mine, but wasn't. Junior had forged my signature. Months ago, apparently. Backdated, clean, legal looking. And I realized, sitting in that too-small house, that I had no home anymore. That night, I sat up staring at the ceiling. I didn't cry. Not yet. I couldn't afford to. Grief is a luxury you get to feel when your next meal isn't in question. I clutched my bag like it was a lifeline. I had exactly $12 and some change in my wallet. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? My husband stole my life. They'd call it a domestic matter, civil court. He planned it all. That's what burned me the most. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a midlife crisis. It was a strategy. A slow, methodical disappearance. A man doesn't close accounts, sell houses, forge signatures, and cut off cell service by accident. By morning, I couldn't stay at Charissa's. Her husband made it clear. He said he didn't sign up for housing refugees. I nodded politely, thanked them for their couch, and left with my suitcase dragging behind me like a wounded leg. That's how I found myself sitting on a bus station bench in Tulsa, staring at the horizon like it owed me something. My body ached, my ankles swelled, my pride was battered. I wasn't just left, I was erased. And yet, somewhere in the silence between bus announcements and overheard conversations, I heard something else rise inside me. Not anger, not revenge, resolve. I whispered, not to anyone but myself. You picked the wrong woman to abandon, Junior. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. A storm had come and taken my home, my money, my man. But I still had my name. I still had my hands. And I still knew how to make something out of nothing. That would have to be enough. For now. The sun in Oklahoma felt different. Sharper. Less forgiving. It beat down on me as I stood outside the Tulsa bus station, with a suitcase too heavy for my wrists and a wallet that might as well have been made of air. I had no return ticket, no plan, and nowhere to go. And yet, I stood up straight. If there's one thing my mama taught me, it was how to carry yourself like you got something worth holding, even when your hands are empty. I tried not to let the tears come. You know how it is. When you're raised in the South, black and female, you're taught to keep your tears close to your chest. Cry if you must, but never in front of people who think it's their job to fix you or pity you. So I breathed deep, adjusted the headscarf I tied that morning without knowing it'd be my only protection against this heat, and sat down on the metal bench outside. I thought of Charissa's face when I told her I was leaving. She looked relieved, and I didn't blame her. That girl had 2 kids under 5 and a marriage hanging on by a thread. Me falling apart in her living room wasn't something she could afford. "I'm sorry, Auntie," she'd said, not meeting my eyes. "Wish I could do more." "You're doing enough, baby," I replied, even if the words tasted like vinegar. My phone was dead. I had no charger. I couldn't even Google a shelter if I wanted to. So I did what I'd learned to do during hard times. Wait. Let the world settle around me and trust that somewhere in all that stillness, a path would show itself. And just like that, it did. Her name was Miss Clarice, and she smelled like baby powder and blue magic hair grease. She walked with a limp and had a voice like a jazz saxophone, low, wise, and full of stories. "You Ruby Mays girl?" she asked, squinting at me like she already knew the answer. I blinked. "Yes, ma'am. She was my mother." "Mm-hmm," she hummed. "Thought I recognized them cheekbones. Your mama used to braid my hair in church basement, back when I still had something worth braiding." She laughed a low, rusty chuckle. "Come on, child. You look like you've been sitting out here longer than pride allows." I didn't ask questions, didn't argue. I picked up my bag and followed her like a child, follows a rhythm they don't know, but trust. That woman took me into her tiny home tucked behind a hardware store and fed me day-old cornbread with pinto beans. The couch she offered sagged in the middle, and the blanket smelled faintly of mothballs. But it was warm, safe. The first real roof since I'd learned my whole life was gone. "You ain't the first woman been left in the dirt by a man thinking he was gold," Clarice said that night. "And you won't be the last. But let me tell you something, Ruby Mays. Dirt can grow things gold can't." I slept like the dead. The next morning I made breakfast. I didn't ask permission, I just did it. Took what little she had in her pantry and made something. Scrambled eggs, grits, and a peach cobbler using canned peaches and a half-stale biscuit mix I found in the back of her cabinet. When she came into the kitchen, she stopped in her tracks. "Well, damn," she said. "I ain't smelled cobbler like that since before arthritis took my joy." I smiled, but it was tight. "Just wanted to say thank you." We ate in silence, but as she chewed, her eyes softened and she said, "You ever sell these pies?" I shook my head. "Used to bake for church events, potlucks, my daughter's friends, but never for money." Clarice leaned back in her chair. "You should." The idea sounded ridiculous at first. Sell pies? Out here? With what? Flour made of hope and prayers. But that afternoon, she walked me 2 blocks to a little church that ran a community kitchen. Introduced me to the pastor's wife like I was family. Said I made cobbler worth forgiving sins for. Turns out, they needed help. Their cook was sick, and they were serving dinner to seniors twice a week. "Can you cook for 40 people?" the pastor's wife asked. I straightened. "I've cooked for church homecomings with no air conditioning and 1 working burner. 40 is a slow Tuesday." They gave me $20 and some donated ingredients to work with. I made chicken stew, cornbread muffins, and, of course, peach cobbler. That evening, when the seniors lined up, I stood behind the counter in a borrowed apron, dishing out love 1 spoonful at a time. By the end of the night, an older gentleman came back to the kitchen, held out a crumpled $5 bill, and said, "You ain't got a bakery, do you? 'Cause I'd pay for this every day." I laughed, but something stirred in me. The next day, I baked 2 small pies from leftover ingredients. Then I made a little cardboard sign, "Ruby's Pies, $3. Advice is free." Clarice helped me carry a folding table down to the corner by the bus stop. I stood there with my pies, my sign, and not a lick of shame. People slowed their cars, some stared. Others rolled down windows and asked what kind. By noon, the pies were gone. 1 woman paid with a $10 bill and waved off the change. "You remind me of my auntie," she said. "She made pecan pies like she was blessing you through sugar." That night, I wept. Not out of grief, not out of shame, but because for the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't fear. I felt capable. The days that followed rolled into each other. I made more pies, borrowed Clarice's kitchen until she joked I should start paying rent in butter. I bought my own flour and sugar with the next round of earnings, learned where the best canned fruit was on sale, adjusted my recipe depending on the weather and crowd. Every day I stood by that bus stop with my table, my pies, and my story quietly folded behind my eyes. One man sat down beside me one afternoon holding a slice of sweet potato pie. "You made this?" "Yes, sir." He chewed slowly. "Tastes like forgiveness." I nodded. That's what I was going for. Word spread. The lady with the pies and the wisdom. The grandmother who told you a story while handing you a slice. They started calling me Mama Ruby. Teenagers came by after school. Men on their lunch break bought extras for their mamas, though I knew half were for themselves. Even a bus driver once yelled out, "Save me a peach, Mama Ruby," as he drove past. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planting roots. One day, while stirring a pot of custard, Clarice looked at me and said, "You ever think maybe Junior did you a favor?" I paused. "No," I said. "But I think maybe I did myself one by not chasing after him." She smiled. "Now that's a pie worth selling." Every good pie starts with a clean surface, chilled butter, and steady hands. The first two I had. The third came later. I'd been baking from Miss Clarisse's kitchen for about a month when I realized I couldn't keep doing it the same way. Her stove was old and tilted slightly, so half my crusts browned unevenly. We ran out of counter space quicker than we ran out of sugar. She didn't complain, God bless her, but I could see the signs. The sideways glances at flour on the floor, the way she winced when the smoke alarm chirped one too many times. "You're growing too fast for this little kitchen," she finally said one night, sipping sweet tea from a chipped mug. "Time for you to spread out, baby." "Where?" I asked. "You know I don't have savings. All I got is a tin full of rolled-up bills and the Lord's good humor." She just smiled. "Sometimes that's enough." We sat in silence a while. Outside, the cicadas buzzed like an audience waiting for curtain call. Then she leaned forward and said something that lit a spark in my bones. "You know Sister Edna down at Christ True Deliverance? Her husband passed last year. Left her the building behind their church. It used to be a laundromat. She's been trying to rent it out ever since." A laundromat? I nearly laughed. But something about the way Clarice said it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a map. The next day, we walked over. The building was nothing to brag on. A faded yellow brick rectangle with boarded windows and an old sign that read "Spin Cycle" in cracked blue paint. Inside, it smelled like dust, dreams, and dryer sheets. But the bones were good. Wide open space. Plumbing still functional. One wall even had a long, low shelf that looked suspiciously like a future serving counter. Edna wore a head wrap and a gold brooch that looked like it had survived 3 wars. She sized me up the way Southern women do. Eyes full of story, mouth set like a question mark. "You're Ruby," she said. "The pie lady?" I nodded. You remind me of my sister," she said. "Used to bake until arthritis got her. Told me once. A good pie can fix what medicine can't." She tapped her cane on the concrete floor. "I'll rent it to you for $50 a month, and first dibs on sweet potato Fridays." I nearly fell to my knees. "Yes, ma'am." We spent the next 2 weeks scrubbing that place until our knuckles were raw. Clarice, Edna, and I painted walls, wiped down counters, patched leaks with duct tape and prayer. We hung gingham curtains in the back, bought a second-hand stove from a lady down the street, and pulled together folding chairs from 3 different church basements. And when it was done, we didn't call it a bakery. We called it a revival. Ruby's revival. It wasn't just a place to buy pie. It was a place to remember who you were before life knocked you down. A place where you could sit in a mismatched chair, drink something sweet, and listen to an old woman hum a hymn while rolling out dough. On opening day, I wore my mother's church apron, the one with embroidered violets and a pocket that had held more peppermints than I could count. I stood behind the counter and waited, hands trembling. At first, only a few people came. Miss Clara from the library, 2 teenagers who used to buy from my table at the bus stop, a mailman who said he smelled cobbler from half a block away. But then came the boom. It started with Tasha, Clarice's granddaughter. 17, always on her phone, always rolling her eyes. I'd never seen her finish a full conversation with an adult. One afternoon, while waiting for a sweet tea refill, she pulled out her phone and said, "Miss Ruby, can I record you making that crust?" Why? Because it's aesthetic. It's got vibe. I didn't know what that meant, but I shrugged. Just don't fill my ankles. She posted a 30-second clip on TikTok with a caption that read, "This is the grandma we all need. She makes pie and peace." That video hit 50,000 views overnight. Then 150,000. By the end of the week, I had a line out the door. People drove from other towns just to taste what I baked and hear me talk. I didn't understand it at first. Why would a stranger drive 40 miles to buy a $3 slice of apple crumble? But when a young woman with green braids and tears in her eyes whispered, "Your voice sounds like my grandma's, and I miss her every day," I got it. It wasn't just food, it was medicine. Soon enough, the orders were coming in faster than I could fill them. I hired 2 helpers, Miss Tony, who had just retired from being a lunch lady, and Lorraine, who'd been laid off from the grocery store. They called me boss, which made me laugh until I realized I really was one now. The revival wasn't just about pies anymore. It became a meeting place. People held baby showers there, prayer circles, first dates. We even hosted a mini open mic one Friday night where a boy rapped about his grandmother's peach cobbler and brought the house down. And through it all, I baked. Sunrise to sunset. Mixing, kneading, baking, and listening. I'd hum old gospel songs while pressing crust into pans, or tell stories about my youth to curious ears while the kettle whistled. I wasn't tired. Not yet. I was blooming. Then one afternoon, a woman from the local paper came in. Her name was Tameka, and she wore red lipstick like armor. "Everybody's been talking about you," she said, notebook already open. "You're a local legend." I waved her off. "I'm a woman who got left and found flour." She smiled. "That's exactly why people need to hear your story." The article came out the next week. Ruby's revival, the woman who rose from the crust up. They printed a photo of me in my apron, holding a pie tin like a trophy. Clarice cried when she saw it. I just sat in my chair, letting the pride settle in my chest like warm sugar. Then came the radio interview, then a podcast feature. And then, a little envelope slipped through my front door with a return address I hadn't seen in over a year. Junior. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because for the first time in a long, long while, I knew it didn't matter. That man had left me with nothing but a suitcase and a prayer, and I had baked my way into a new life. I let the envelope sit on the kitchen table for 2 days. Didn't touch it. Didn't peek. Just let it rest there beside my old Bible and the jar of sugar I kept forgetting to refill. Junior's name was written in that same slow, leaning script I'd seen on birthday cards and mortgage checks for over 2 decades. Only now it looked like a signature from a man who'd finally remembered I existed. Clarice noticed it the second she walked in. "That from him?" she asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded. You can read it? I shrugged. Not today. Truth is, I already knew what was inside. Apologies written in cheap ink, regrets dressed up like excuses. Maybe even a check, if he'd gotten bold enough to think money could patch a crater. But nothing could pay back what he took. The next day, I came into the revival early, just as the sun peeked over the steeple across the street. I unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and let the warm silence greet me like an old friend. It smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil. Home. Lorraine came in at 8 sharp, apron already tied. You okay, Mama Ruby? She asked, wiping her hands on a towel. You look like you've seen something. I seen something, all right, I muttered. Seen the past knocking at my door. She gave me that look. Gentle, steady, not prying, but present. Well, she said after a pause, you got better things to serve than ghosts. I smiled. She was right. By mid-morning, the cafe was buzzing. I was rolling dough while humming Precious Lord under my breath, when the door opened and a breeze swept in, colder than it had any right to be. And then I saw him. Junior. He looked older than I remembered. Not in the way grey hair ages a man, but in the way guilt bends his back. His once sharp goatee had faded to salt and pepper, and the tailored jackets he used to wear had been replaced with a department store windbreaker. He stood just inside the doorway, eyes scanning the space, like he wasn't sure if it was real. He didn't speak. Neither did I. The room quieted like someone had pressed pause on the world. Then Clarice appeared beside me from the kitchen. Her jaw tightened when she saw him. Can I help you? She asked, arms crossed, voice like steel wrapped in lace. Junior stepped forward. I'm here to see Ruby. I took a breath, wiped my hands on my apron, and stepped out from behind the counter. My heart didn't pound. My knees didn't shake. If anything, I felt heavier, like everything I'd carried, everything I'd built, had finally grounded me. You found me, I said. Took you long enough. He shifted, eyes darting to the floor. I didn't know if I should come. You shouldn't have. He swallowed. Can we talk? I looked around. Every eye in the room was pretending not to be on us. No, I said, but I'll listen. We stepped outside. He stood under the revival sign like a man who'd just remembered what it meant to stand in the presence of grace. I crossed my arms, not because I was angry, but because my warmth didn't belong to him anymore. I messed up, Ruby, he started. You think? I was scared, trapped. I didn't know how to be a husband anymore. I didn't know who I was. I blinked slowly. So you erased me to find yourself? He winced. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. How'd you mean for it to happen, Junior? Leave your wife in a different state with $12 in her purse and a bad knee. Forge her signature. Sell her house. Was that part of the plan too? He looked down. I wasn't thinking straight. No, you were thinking perfectly clear. That's what's so scary. He was silent for a while. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a little envelope. This is everything I took, he said. Bank info, legal papers, what I could fix. I didn't take it. That's not why you came, Junior. He blinked. You didn't come to return anything. You came to see if I'd let you come back. His silence was answer enough. I shook my head. This place? I gestured to the building, the little chalkboard sign with today's pie flavors, the people behind the windows drinking tea and laughing. I built this with my own 2 hands and the help of women who know how to show up. You left me for dead, and I came back with a bakery. You don't get to be part of the comeback just because you regret the crash. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked like he wanted to cry. Maybe he did. But my tears had already been cried for both of us. I had no more to spend. I stepped closer and handed him something I had kept for this very moment. A single slice of sweet potato pie in a to-go box. On the napkin beneath it, I'd written one line. "Your piece has already been served. I'm baking for someone else now." He stared at the box, then looked up at me. "I did love you, Ruby." "I believe you," I said. "But love without respect is just sentiment, and I can't feed a life on that." He nodded. "Goodbye." I watched him walk away. Not slow, not fast, just gone. When I went back inside, Clarice handed me a cup of tea without a word. Lorraine gave me a pat on the shoulder. I picked up my rolling pin, dusted it with flour, and got back to work. Because the past might knock, but the future waits for no one. The next week passed in a blur of cinnamon, powdered sugar, and camera flashes. After Junior walked out of my life for the second and final time, I expected quiet. But what I got instead was noise. Good noise. Grateful noise. The kind that comes when people stop whispering and start testifying. It began with the newspaper article from Temecca. "The pie that survived a man," the headline read. She had written it with reverence, honesty, and just enough edge to make it sing. My story was all there. How I'd been left in Tulsa with $12 and a suitcase, how I'd gone from baking on a bus stop corner to running a full-service cafe. She mentioned Junior. Yes, but barely. A footnote. The main focus was me. My hands, my story, my name. Ruby Mays Henderson. Not Mrs. Junior Henderson. Not the woman he left. Just me. By the time the Sunday paper hit the front steps of every church in Tulsa County, we had a line outside Ruby's revival before we even flipped the sign to open. And not just regulars. New people. Curious people. Women with purses clutched tight and tears in their eyes. A group of college students who said they just wanted to hug the grandma who said no and built yes. One woman, probably in her 50s, hugged me so tightly I nearly dropped a tray of lemon chess slices. She whispered, "I left my husband last month. Your story gave me breath." That was the word she used. Breath. Not hope. Not strength. Breath. Like I'd reminded her how to inhale again. Later that afternoon, Clarice turned on the little television we kept in the back by the prep table. Channel 5 was airing a special called Women Who Rise. I'd been interviewed for it weeks ago, but I didn't know they'd actually included me. And there I was, up on the screen, flour-dusted and smiling, rolling out dough while gospel hummed in the background. The footage cut between me humming and serving customers, telling the story of my revival. The voiceover said something like, "In a world that often discards women over 60, Ruby Mays Henderson proves that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you bake while you're still standing." I covered my mouth with one hand. Clarice dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Lorraine whooped loud enough to scare a customer. The cafe swelled. Not just with orders, but with purpose. I started noticing men bringing their mothers. Young women showing up with notebooks, asking if I offered baking classes. I didn't, but the seed was planted. Then came the letter. A cream envelope with gold script and a return address from Atlanta. At first, my stomach twisted. For a second, I thought Junior had mailed me something else. But when I opened it, I saw the embossed seal of the Southern Women's Empowerment Foundation. They were inviting me to speak. Not at a church tea, not at a potluck, at a full-scale conference. Thousands of women, business owners, educators, leaders, survivors. They called it the Gathering of Grace. They wanted me to be one of the keynote speakers. Clarice snatched the letter from my hand like it was a check. "Girl," she said, "you better start writing your speech." I had no idea what to say. What could I offer to women in suits and high heels who probably never cried over burned pie crusts or spent the night on a church couch because they had nowhere else to go? But then I remembered something. Something my mama used to say while folding laundry. Truth don't wear heels. It wears feet that been walked on. So I said yes. The event was in Atlanta. Returning to the city where I'd lost everything felt like standing in front of a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open. But I wasn't the same woman who left that place broken. I was Ruby, Revival Ruby, pie lady, truth teller, boss woman. I arrived in a borrowed navy suit, hair twisted back with a flower pin just behind my ear. When I stepped onto the stage, the crowd quieted. Women leaned forward in their seats. I felt my hands tremble, but I also felt my name settle on my shoulders like a cloak. I started slow. I was 63 years old when my husband put me on a bus to Oklahoma and disappeared. He emptied our bank account, sold our house, left me with nothing but my name. A pause. And thank God it was mine. I spoke for 20 minutes, told them about Clarice, about the bus stop pies, about that dusty old laundromat turned bakery. I spoke about dignity and survival, about how sometimes your comeback doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like flour on your apron and a receipt book full of $3 blessings. When I finished, they stood. The applause rolled over me like a wave, not because I was fancy, not because I was polished, but because I was real. I told the truth. And when you tell the truth, the right people will always clap. Afterward, a woman in a red blazer came up to me and said, "Miss Ruby, do you realize what you've done? You've built more than a bakery. You've built a blueprint." I smiled. I was just trying to survive. She shook her head. "You redefined survival. You made it sacred." When I returned to Tulsa, there was a new energy in the revival. People had watched the speech. Someone even printed out the transcript and taped it to the bulletin board. A school teacher came in with 20 students and asked if I'd speak to them about perseverance. A woman from Houston called to ask if she could open her own revival pie stand and donate part of the proceeds to women's shelters. I said yes, but only under one condition. "She's got to call it by her own name," I told Clarice later. "This is Ruby's revival. Hers should be something else, something that reminds her who she is." Because names matter. And mine? Mine was finally more than a signature on a marriage certificate or a line on a lease. It was a brand, a testimony, a prayer with butter and sugar folded in. Ruby Mays Henderson, woman, warrior, whisk-wielding wonder. The name he tried to erase was now on the lips of women who had never met me, but saw themselves in my story. And that was more than justice. That was resurrection. They say if you make it through the fire and come out still breathing, your breath isn't just your own anymore. It belongs to every woman still inside the flames. That's what I started to believe in the months after Atlanta. I came back to Tulsa thinking the standing ovation would be the peak, that nothing could match the feeling of hundreds of women rising to their feet for a 60-something-year-old woman in a navy suit who once slept on a borrowed couch with nothing but cornbread crumbs in her pocket. But God, as he often does, had more in mind. It began on a Tuesday, quiet and sunny. The line at Ruby's revival had wrapped around the building by 9:30 a.m., and I'd already rolled out 24 crusts when a woman named Gina stepped through the front door. She looked about 50, wearing a wrinkled denim jacket and holding her purse close, like it contained the last bit of dignity she had left. She ordered one slice of apple pie and asked if she could sit in the corner a while. Lorraine, bless her, brought her some tea and whispered, "You take your time, honey." I didn't ask her story. I didn't need to. I saw the story in her silence. At the end of the day, After the chairs were turned up and the broom rested in the corner, Gina came back to the counter. Her eyes were puffy, but her voice was clear. "I lost my job 3 months ago," she said. "My husband left a year before that. I got a GED, but no real skills. Just know how to feed people. Always loved baking. My mama taught me when I was 10. I looked at her, heart tugging. "You want to work?" She blinked. "You hiring?" I nodded. "I am now." She started that Friday, and within 2 weeks was folding crust like she'd been born with butter in her veins. She was gentle with customers, sharp with flour measurements, and had a smile that peeked out slow like sunshine through blinds. Gina was the first. Then came Sheila, a retired bus driver who wanted to stay busy. Then Miss Adeline, 71 years old, who said, "Don't let the cane fool you. I can still whip a meringue like nobody's business." I hired them all. Before long, I realized this place wasn't just about pies anymore. It was a haven. We started calling ourselves the Second Wind Crew. Women who had been counted out, turned away, told they were too old, too emotional, too worn out. And yet here we were, aprons tied, hands dusted in flour, giving Tulsa the sweetest revival it never saw coming. That's when I got the idea. The program started small, Saturday classes in the back of the cafe. I called it Pie and Power. We set up folding chairs, passed out notebooks, and made space for truth. Every session, I taught one recipe and one principle. First week, apple pie and financial basics. Second week, sweet potato pie and tenant rights. Third, chess pie and how to spot emotional abuse. I invited speakers from the community. A retired lawyer named Miss B, a banker who'd survived foreclosure, a therapist who volunteered her time. We didn't charge a dime. We just asked one thing of every woman who came. Bring a story and bring your hunger. Word spread fast. Local shelters sent women our way. A church across town started donating supplies. A bakery in Oklahoma City mailed us a check with a note that said, "You reminded us why we started baking in the first place." We changed the name to Pie and Reboot and made it official. Clarice helped me fill out the non-profit paperwork. Tasha, now in community college, ran our Instagram page and designed flyers like she was born for it. She posted one video of me teaching crust folding that hit 400,000 views in 3 days. The comment that got me said, "I wish this was real. I wish I could sit in that room." So I replied, "Baby, it is, and there's a seat for you if you ever get to Tulsa." Some did. One woman flew in from Missouri just to attend 2 Saturdays in a row. She brought a backpack full of trauma and left with a flash drive full of resources and a tin of snickerdoodles that Adeline made special. But it wasn't all sweet. Running a non-profit and a cafe at the same time took its toll. There were days I forgot to eat, days I burned the crust, days I went home and collapsed into the armchair with tears that didn't even need a reason. That's when Mama's voice would visit me. "You didn't come this far to fold now. You're baking legacy. That takes endurance." So I pressed on. One evening, I got a call from my son. We hadn't spoken in a while, not since before Junior left. Things between us had gone cold, not angry, just hollow. He'd never forgiven me for staying with Junior all those years. Thought I should have walked long before Tulsa. But that night, his voice cracked open. "Mama," he said, "I saw the video, the one with the crust and the speech in Atlanta." I didn't say anything, just waited. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I should have been there." I swallowed hard. I wasn't ready to be seen then, but I'm glad you're seeing me now. We talked for 2 hours, laughed, cried a little, promised to try. Next week he came to visit with my grandbabies. They ran through the cafe like it was a playground. Tasha gave them cookies, Gina braided one of the girls' hair, and I held the youngest in my arms, while stirring a pot of lemon filling. "I'm proud of you," my son said. I didn't answer, just smiled, because I was proud of me too. One day, I walked through the revival after close, looking at the framed photos on the wall, pictures of every woman who came through our Pie and Reboot program. Underneath each one, we wrote her name and one word she chose for herself. Sheila, Faithful Gina, Reclaimed Tasha, Blooming Ruby, Home, my name. Not just spoken, not just printed, claimed, etched in something bigger than me. Mama used to say, "God won't always calm the storm, baby. Sometimes he just hands you an apron and says, 'Bake anyway.'" So I did. And somewhere between my 9th pie of the day and teaching my 3rd class of the week, I realized something. This wasn't my second wind. This was my true beginning. The morning was quiet. Not the heavy kind of quiet you get before a storm, but the soft, golden kind. The kind that sits on your shoulders like a shawl and makes you feel safe just being alive. I opened the cafe early, not for the customers, but for myself. The crew would come in later. Gina would put on the coffee. Miss Adeline would warm her hands by the oven. Lorraine would dance to whatever Motown song she queued up on the old Bluetooth speaker. But right now, it was just me. I walked through the space slowly, my fingers brushing the tops of the tables, touching the worn wood of the counter, pausing over the glass pastry display filled with pies waiting for names. I still labelled every pie by hand. That was something I never gave up. There was something sacred in pressing pen to paper, in writing apple crumble like a signature of love. Outside the window, the sun lifted over the steeple across the street, and I whispered, without meaning to, "Thank you." Not for anything big, just for this moment, this breath. Then I heard the door creak open, and I looked up expecting one of the crew. It wasn't. It was a girl, maybe 13, 14, skin like toffee and eyes too tired for someone her age. She hovered at the entrance, a thin jacket draped over her arms and a plastic grocery bag clutched tight to her chest. A backpack dangled off one shoulder, worn and fraying. "You open?" she asked. I nodded. Always. She stepped in slowly, eyeing everything like she wasn't sure if she belonged here. I knew that look. I'd worn it once, too. "You hungry?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sit where you like, baby." I poured her a cup of tea, set a warm plate in front of her with a slice of chess pie and a biscuit. She ate slow, eyes darting now and then, the way people do when they've learned to be ready to run. After a while, I asked her name. She told me. I won't share it here, not because it's not beautiful, but because it's hers to tell. But I asked what brought her in. "My mama's boyfriend kicked us out," she said, picking at the crust. "Mama told me to go find somewhere warm. Said she'd come back. That was 2 nights ago." My chest tightened. "Do you like to bake?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "I used to help my grandma before she passed." "Well, you've got good hands," I said. "You ever want to learn how to braid dough, I can teach you." She looked up, eyes shining. "You'd let me?" "Of course," I said. "That's the whole point." Later that day, I walked her to Clarice's place. The guest room was ready, just like always. Clarice opened the door without asking a single question. That's her gift. She doesn't ask how you got there. She just reminds you that you are. That night, I sat in my old chair with my old quilt across my knees, rocking slowly with a cup of tea in my hand and a fire crackling low. Jason, my grandson, had left his drawing on the counter, a crooked heart with Mama Ruby's pie place scribbled in crayon. I smiled. I thought of the girl, of Gina, of Tasha, now applying to university on a full scholarship, of Sheila's new business selling spice blends, of all the women who sat in this place and left standing straighter. And I thought of Junior, not with anger, not with bitterness, just stillness. He had been the match, but I'd been the flame. There's a difference. One burns and leaves nothing. The other gives light and keeps going. I stood up and walked to the kitchen where my recipe book sat open. The cover was fraying now, pages stained with molasses and memory. I flipped to the first page. Written there in my mama's hand, the perfect recipe. 1 cup of strength, 1/2 cup of grace, 3 heaping spoons of truth, a dash of sorrow, a pinch of faith, and a whole lot of heat. Bake until transformed. Serve to those who forgot they're worthy. I closed the book and turned off the light. The next day, the revival held our biggest pie and reboot class yet. 40 women, all ages, all walks of life. Some came in shaking, some came in mad, some came in silent. But they all came. And when the girl from that morning stepped up and asked, "Miss Ruby, were you ever scared?" I smiled. Baby, I still am. I let the room go quiet, like a good pause in a song, but I never let the fear get the last word. I give that to faith. After class, someone brought me a framed picture. It was me, rolling dough, head bowed, eyes soft. At the bottom, the words read, "She didn't rebuild her life, she baked a new one." That frame hangs by the front door now, right under the sign that says, "Welcome to Ruby's Revival. Pie with a purpose." If you're ever in Tulsa, stop by. We've always got something sweet cooling on the rack. We've always got room for one more at the table. And if life has ever left you on a bus bench with nothing but a name, come inside. We've been saving you a slice. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There's more strength, healing, and real talk where this came from. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to rise. And if you're ready for the next chapter, check out the other videos on the channel. Your revival might be one story away.